Speaking of dopes, John Doyle made a new video. So I guess we could watch John Doyle's new video called Exposing the Suppressed Truth About Individualism and Collectivism. Holy cannoli, anonymous cheerer. 10,000 biddy dono. 10,000 biddies, dude. That's a lot of biddies. Thank you very much, whoever you are, for that tremendous gift. Woo! Big timer. Sadly, we don't have the corn stuff. That is corn whale. There you go. That's a bunch of biddies. It's trash night. Oh yeah. We got a little John Doyle for you. So let's get on into this. And I appreciate you, anonymous gifter, for whoever you are. Dropping a bunch of money, dude. Appreciate it.
Everybody knows that this country is headed to hell in a handcart. This is not a fresh take. We've been saying this forever. And it's not that we're crying wolf. It's just that it keeps getting worse, and we're accelerating towards that point more every week. Like,
what does he think is the acceleration towards the bad stuff, though? I know he'd say, like, the libs or whatever. But, like, the way that Republicans and conservatives would organize the country to make it good would harm a large swath of people materially. The way that the left wants to make the country good would harm nobody. It would annoy some people because you wouldn't be able to be cunts to everybody. That's pretty much it. Like it'd harm, you know what I mean? Like, oh, they'd get taxed a little bit, and then also trans people are valid, and you can't be racist. Please don't be racist. Like, that would be it. Having scientific literacy would be dope. You know what I mean? Wrong button.
Like, we've probably got about 10 years at best to turn this thing around before there's literally nothing else we can do, which we will talk about in depth in another video soon. But I want to outline something that is somewhat instinctual, should be somewhat self-evident, but
pretty sure going from an immeasurable, impossible to spend fortune to an immeasurable, possible, impossible to spend fortune is harm enough. True. It's just a slightly smaller, immeasurable, impossible to spend fortune. It's like two infinities, and then you take one of the infinities away. That's a whole infinity. You know what I mean? It's a whole infinite quantity
that people still tend to overlook anyways, especially within the context of political discourse and political solutions. And that is simply the way we go about solving problems, because obviously what we're doing now is not exactly working, and the frustration is always, well, we're just not doing it correctly. That wasn't real conservatism, literally identical to, well, that wasn't real communism. And what this neglects to take into account is simply the possibility that perhaps many of the presuppositions upon which our entire movement or ideology is built are just false, just plain wrong. And obviously, if your foundation is unstable, if it's incorrect, you're never going to get anywhere. Like the House of...
It's funny that I agree with him until he says more words. If he just said the conservative platform is fundamentally mistaken at a foundational level, I agree. But then he starts to say 32 more minutes of words. A whole 32 of them. So now I got to listen to that and get mad about it.
Of cards will just keep collapsing the same way that if you were trying to solve an equation with incorrect or inaccurate values, it just would never compute, because thinking reasonably with unreasonable or incorrect presuppositions will always lead away from the truth. Obviously, it's going to lead away from the correct solution and instead lead into confusion or incorrect answers. And I'll give you an example. Right off the bat, let's put the end caps on suicide watch. Right now, we are in a position where there are transnational megacorporations that have more power than the state.
That's bad because capitalism has caused this. That is capitalism. It must be much more regulated, and we need to decommodify survival necessities. Decommodify them. I could fix it overnight, dude.
These corporations are run by woke oligarchs who want...
Now they're woke. The oligarchs of the corporations are woke. Woke. What does that even mean? Anyone who claims... First of all, we on the left say woke hyperbolically. It's mostly a joke, right? It just means that, it's sort of a joke, but, most people on the left would disagree that anybody that has billions of dollars is capable of qualifying for the title of woke. You can't be woke because it implies that you understand like class solidarity and the needs of the lower class, and that you are willing to do what it takes to make sure that discrepancy is met, and yet you are hoarding billions of dollars. Doesn't seem to me that tracks, John.
And do successfully profit from the degeneration of our society. They also largely have control over our government so as to destroy small businesses, perspective for actual competition, etc.
Yeah, you know, like Exxon, like Steel Capital, like fucking any of the energy sectors, Elon, Amazon that has a huge swath of the labor force, the Walmart people whose names I'm forgetting, like the Koch brothers, like all the Wall Street people. These are all Republicans. These are all conservatives. There's not like, oh, the left is doing it. Like, what the fuck? The owner of McDonald's or what? Yeah, no, they are like, we don't want a minimum wage. We are anti-worker billionaires. That's all it is, dude. And when you, and I don't know if John is ever going to pay attention to a word I say. He blocked me. But like, if you want a healthy America, you would want healthy Americans. I'm not talking about healthcare, but obviously that would be a thing, and it shouldn't be commodified. But you would want a healthy working class specifically to make the cogs of capitalism continue to turn. And if the working class doesn't have the monetary ability to spend their capital that they gained from selling their labor, the machine breaks down. You need that circulation, and then you can't sit it at the top. It has to circulate back down. If it doesn't do that, then your capitalism doesn't work. And I don't know why they don't understand that. All you have to do is prop up the working class, and capitalism will continue on for hundreds of years. Do you want capitalism? If you're a capitalist and you're like, fucking capitalism, capitalism will last for 100 years. It'll be less just capitalism. It'll be, over the years, it will be closer and closer to a market socialism, but nonetheless, capitalism will remain. If you don't do that, it's just going to fail. It's just going to go into a state of failing, and it probably will soon. We will probably go into another recession, and I wouldn't be surprised if for a little piece of time, conservatives got their hands on some more power, made it worse, and then eventually, like, that's the death wail of their movement, and it's just too far gone for them to continue. Like, worst magician on ice. Thanks for the prime, dude. It's not a tenable situation the way that they want to run their corporate like cronyism. You know what I mean? It just isn't tenable for anybody involved in the system, even the wealthy, because the wealthy still need a place to live. And we're not talking about the 300 billionaires that will be fine on Mars, where hopefully we can just cut the cord and be like, oops, joke's on you, you're stuck on Mars. Just send them to Mars and then be like, oh shit, dude, and then ghost them. Just ghost them, delete their number.
Sometimes this is what's referred to as state capitalism or corporatism, or in other words, not true capitalism. So why does this happen in the first place? Well, because as the ANCAP will happily tell you, businesses have an incentive to maximize market share and profits, all that good stuff. And the logical consequence of a corporation gaining enough wealth and market share to where it's more powerful than the state is simply for it to weaponize the state by buying it so as to maintain that position of wealth and power. This is exactly what's happening now. So what's the solution? Well, just go back to the free market so it can happen again. Like, how are you even going to do that in the first place when now the elite...
Is she going to advocate for like more of a fascist planned militaristic manufacturing German style World War II era economy? Because that would be amazing.
Elites own your government. You're not. The natural cycle of total free market capitalism has progressed in front of our very eyes, and we are confused by this because we've been spoon-fed decades of capitalism equals good propaganda, and it is. No one's saying it's not. No one is making the argument that, like, markets are inefficient. This is simply an indictment of the idea of capitalism purely for capitalism's sake, of amoral markets.
I mean, I'm tending to agree right now. Before he says the bad words, I agree that capitalism for capitalism's sake is the problem with our modern system. Absolutely. I do not feel as though his solutions are going to satisfy me, though. I'm surprised. I have covered Mr. Dapperton before. He's worthless. What a worthless human.
That because of man's flawed nature will always devolve into the current state. Plus, the state of technology, everything being so connected, everything being so centralized, this is just inevitable.
Well,
monopolies can only be created by the state. Yeah, maybe that was true like 150 years ago. Not anymore. We're not talking about steel and rubber anymore or whatever. Like, the idea is only true in the abstract, on paper. Nowadays, the only thing that could prevent a monopoly is the state, if its allegiance were, to small businesses and to the American people, but it isn't because it's been bought out by the elite class because there's such a huge disparity between the power of these corporations and the power of the state. And it's funny, too, because...
So his idea for a better economy is for it to only be run by small businesses, which in some ways could work. But at the same time, you'd have to... That would raise pricing on a lot of stuff, which means that you have to, like, again, you can have ethical corporatism in some aspects of our markets. Like, you can do it. Like the car companies, for instance. They have the apparatus, they have the mechanical apparatus, the physical apparatus to manufacture cars on a wide network and ship them at a reasonable cost. and do it with a modicum of efficiency, whereas small businesses are not going to be able to do that, right? Which, I mean, an environmentalist might say, "Oh, cool, fewer cars, that's good," and that's fine. Yeah, I get it. Cars, however, are integral to the way that our society is structured, and obviously, we can move towards trains and buses and more public stuff to get rid of some traffic, but that's a little bit different. But you can do that while offering, the employees of that company, share in profits, like a profit share, a co-op system. You could do ethical corporatism in some ways. Other ways it doesn't make sense, like corporate healthcare is obviously bullshit. So there's not a lot of ethics based in like manufacturing a product other than your responsibility to provide safe products, right? Which is, I think, a thing that everyone wants. Well, except for the companies that make them under capitalism. But if it was, say, you were compensated based on maybe you got a bonus instead of getting tax breaks for just flat manufacturing anything in the country, what if you got tax breaks based specifically on safety statistics for your products? You know what I mean? If it's something like a car. These are just things that we could do to improve the ethics of the market themselves, incentivizing good behavior instead of like incentivizing loophole behavior. And then we could also integrate, instead of getting rid of infrastructure, which is not a good thing for anybody. I don't think anybody agrees that we need to tear down the infrastructure that America has built, right? Like just in general. And I don't mean roads and stuff, but I mean like a factory, this roadway. We've already invested in it, and they are useful things, but they're not being wielded correctly. It's like I don't know, giving a kid a sword. Why does the kid have a sword? Give it to someone that knows sword things. The kid's gonna hurt himself or others with the sword, and nonetheless, they're like, everybody should have a sword. It's a right to have a sword. Doesn't make sense.
Because anarcho-capitalists will try to appear reasonable by saying, well, we're not saying it's a perfect system. Obviously, everything has...
Anonymous cheerer again. I don't know if it's the same person, but that's another 10,000 biddies, dude. Good gracious. Thank you again, anonymous person, whoever that is.
Has flaws. Hey, here's a flaw. Well, no, because that's not actually true capitalism. So in summary, orthodox free market theory, which makes perfect sense in theory. It's crystal clear on paper, but in practice, it turns out that things are slightly more complicated than that. Businesses get bigger than the state.
Trying to make Jake into a sugar baby? Hey, whoever you are, DM me. I'm kidding. I'm a dumb.
Then they weaponize the state to crush their competition. No more competition. Cool. Now I can become totally woke and I don't have to worry about losing money over it. The point of all of this being that many of our current...
Why does he think it has anything to do with wokeness? There's no social... Look, we can disagree on social things, John. I am fine with disagreeing over social things. If you think trans people are icky, go for it. I do not. I think they're awesome. Okay? And that we can disagree over that. But you don't get to say, like, I want to take their rights too. You know what I mean? So if we could just be like, okay, you are like, the gays, the blacks, the Mexicans, cool. Let's talk about that. But your policy about capitalism specifically, nothing to do with that shit. Nothing. It just happens to affect those people because they live here. Okay? That's it. Like why can't you understand that it is not the same? Just because people on the left advocate for specific, like, economic policies, healthcare is a great example. Pretty much everyone that agrees with universal healthcare agrees to some extent, hopefully maximally, but obviously that's not the case, to some extent, at least with some form of what you would consider left-leaning social opinions. You know what I mean? That's just because of the way that we are partisan, right? That's like a social microcosm, or macrocosm rather, I guess, of how we organize ourselves. Sugar babies can be doms? Well, then give me money. But and now the cooldown on the hype train just started. Damn, we just cooled down, chat. So tired of hearing the word woke. It means nothing here. It's just such a waste of time.
Problems can be traced back to our incorrect understandings of things like individualism and collectivism. And if we want to actually have a shot going forward, then we kind of have to correct those understandings. So we will go over the real truth about individualism that no one will tell you, and how it was integrated into our movement to destroy us, why we were doing so well as a nation, largely in spite of individualism instead of because of it, examples of how the full cycle of liberalism looks when allowed to play out, and how this fixation on hyper-individualism destroys our personal and national identities and the country as a whole. You're definitely going to want to watch this one all the way through, so do stay tuned.
Thanks for meeting me here on short notice.
Oh, God. I don't know what's going on here. I'm not looking at your merch.
Doyle.
Oh, God, it's so loud, dude.
Before we get started, I have a couple things I want to say. Firstly, I feel very humbled going into the 4th year of the channel because, as you know, we just had the 3-year anniversary of the channel. We launched the new merchandise for it, which, by the way, is still available on the website, so get it while you can.
Is it still happening, bro?
About this, but yeah, you know, watching the traffic on the merch store for the first few hours, I went outside of the lecture room to talk to him, and then I went out in the real world because, like, with the shirts, I'm concerned with that. Last thing I want to say is that this is the last prerequisite video before the Satanism liberalism from you. That is the result of propaganda conditioning. Focus groups, for example, all over again. That is because you were 1984. That's the response.
Are we ready?
Totally akin, by the way.
Are we ready?
That I'm alone, but this kindness, because men are being emotions to get them to support certain
Where the
ideas.
fuck is he?
I was gonna have to.
Okay, I guess we're gonna have to watch this.
Liberalism, Christianity, Conservatism
this.
series,
Fuck it.
because when I was doing the outlines,
Satanism / liberalism.
I realized that a lot of time was going to have to be spent talking about the things that we're going to go over now, and I didn't want to distract too much from the title subject matter. So we've got this video, that series.
Like, it's just so weird that he thinks Satanism is a thing. Like, there's a few people, but like, I don't know a Satanist. Someone in chat inevitably like, I'm a Satanist. But like, do you like fucking practice? Are you a practicing Satanist, or you just have like a pin, or you've been to a Satanist thing? Like, it's so weird. This is not like a movement.
Maybe some classic fall street content. So much in store. Let us begin. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that if you hear a word and that word triggers an emotional response from you, that is the result of propaganda conditioning. If you react to a word with an emotional response, that is because of propaganda. That is because these people hold focus groups.
Is he talking about like saying racist shit?
They run tests and they analyze literally how to manipulate people's emotions to get them to support certain ideas and causes. So if you hear me say the word collectivism, for example, you might think, oh yeah, no, I don't agree with that. But if you go, what? This is what the fascist communists did. This is 1984 all over again. That is because you are the unwitting victim of a psychological operation. You have my pity. It's literally just like the 2 Minutes Hate from 1984. That's the response. Totally akin, by the way, to
He's still on this rant. Can we get into
Orange
the video,
Man
bro?
bad, madrumph. But that being said, please don't get the impression that I'm a collectivist or something. I'm not. I don't want to share property. I want freedom. I want to be left alone. But
what is this sharing of property thing? What do they think? Okay, communists in chat. Can we stop pretending that the goal for like winning the next election is going to be a property-less society? Like, it's not a thing. I don't think, like, do communists say, like, oh yeah, I want no property tomorrow. It's gonna happen. Like, what? Can we stop? Whichever one of you is spreading this rumor towards John, will you quit? Because, like, what the fuck? Like, it's not happening. It is not happening. Again, capitalism is a pool. You gotta walk out of it. You're not wet immediately when you walk out. Come on, guys. Ridiculous. Personal property is not the same as private property. It doesn't matter. We're not going to get rid of personal or private property in any way, shape, or form in any of our lifetimes. It's not happening. There's no reason to advocate for it. There's no reason to make John have this talking point. It's not a thing. Nobody is going to live in this society. None of us will. It's irrelevant to the conversation. Fight for the next thing that you can fight for. Please. Please. Even if you like property's bad. Property's bad. Cool. Great. But we're not going to get away. We're not going to get out of it. It's not going to happen. We are too integrated. If we were like, I don't know. If we were like Sweden, maybe we got a shot. Maybe we got a shot. Let's talk about it. But it's a dominoes. It's dominoes. Right? You need but it's the one with the bigger domino. So you can't just put the little domino here and then try to make the bigger one go. It's not going to happen. You kind of get it, you know? You got to do it in order. You got to do the correct stuff. We're America. We are capitalism in the world. We are it. We are not going to get out of capitalism at any point in our lifetimes. We need to understand that and focus on the fact that while it's bad, it's a thing. So we have to work within the understanding that it will be moving forward. And I think most leftists who advocate for any policy understand that. So John is talking to fucking what, Mao? Is he talking to Karl Marx's ghost? Like, Finland? I don't know. Zarek? Who fucking knows anything about that shit? Finland, Sweden, Denmark. They're all exactly the same country. Exactly the same. Don't pretend you... Stop it. Unless you're from Finland, Sweden, or Denmark, nobody knows the difference. Wouldn't it be in a better... Why? No one knows because they're Finnish? Who knows? Pretend that we know the difference. None of it. Me and my Antifa are going to make a money bomb. I'm going to destroy it all. There you go. Flower Girl actually going to Spitfire. They're exact same place. My buddy is from Finland, and he doesn't know the fucking difference. They don't know the difference. They're exactly the same people. They're a different culture. They're lying. They're lying. They don't know. Every European is exactly the same. You know that. It's in the Constitution.
I also fundamentally reject this concept of individualism that we've all been sold because it's been a disaster for the human race. And I think you'll find yourself with me there if you hear me out. But first, hear me out.
They're
on
all
this,
British. That's
because
right.
Men are being...
You all talk like this in every movie. Okay? Because we can't be fucked to do your real accent, all right? You're just this. You're from far away. Oi, mate. Like, right? Yeah. That's all of you to us, all right? Look at these fake dongs.
Inundated with overpriced boxers designed for testosterone-deficient men. One brand even going so far as to turn the waistband into a rainbow. And you know what they say? If you have a rainbow waistband, it's because you're a gay man. But here at Heck Off Commie, we demand more. More room and support where it counts.
Is he doing another ad? Jesus fucking Christ. He's just bumper stickers.
The final nail in the coffin, and each decade has been just an additional strike from the hammer. And because hindsight's 2020, it's easy for us now to look back and see how this was basically inevitable, but regardless, the people who lived...
What do you mean hindsight's 2020? Bro, Karl Marx said this was inevitable. Many people have said this was inevitable. What do you mean hindsight? Foresight. It's inevitable. What? It's so weird to agree with, like, leading leftist economists that the end of capitalism in this way is inevitable, and to be like, yeah, with hindsight, it was obvious now. Shut up. I don't believe in collectivism. Individualism is a lot true.
Through the two world wars, saw death and destruction on an incomprehensible scale, something that you and I just couldn't understand. And so the thoughts after World War II, understandably, were, okay, How do we make sure that something like this never happens again? And basically,
Why is it always World War II? Bro, World War II, specifically from an economic standpoint, marked America's real big rise in manufacturing and obviously the decimation of pretty much the entire European, Russian, Chinese, well, not Chinese so as much, but definitely Eastern China, and Japanese, even fucking India got fucked up, Northern Africa got fucked up. Pretty much the entire other side of the world got fucked up and lost a fuckload of infrastructure, and it made us the de facto superpower. That's why. It wasn't like this moral thing because we went on this crusade against evil. Like, we let them do evil for a long time with our protectionist ideals. Can we push back on the idea that America is just filled with heroes? Yes, Nazis were bad. Yes, there is an ethical good, positive, like, that came out of our intervention of World War II, but we could have prevented even more bad stuff if we had gone earlier. We could have prevented the downfall of the Europeans and everybody else, but it seemed to be in our vested interest to let them hammer away at each other for as long as we could possibly stay out of it. I'm just saying. But like, the real turning point was 2001. It was 9/11. That's the real turning point. Like, I don't know how you could disagree with that if you know history at all. We changed from a sort of a Reaganomics. We're kind of coming out of that form of capitalism and sort of going into, like, Democrat capitalism. And then 9/11 happens, and it gives excuses to the Republican administration to make a lot of profit off of war and oil and, sort of trying to manipulate the world with it. And not to mention the Patriot Act. There's just so much that goes into 9/11 that really flipped the script for the path of the entire world, but also capitalism specifically in this country, because just the way that we organized after that was very, very specific. Remember, the U.S. turned away thousands of Jewish refugees. Real good guy behavior there, of course. Yeah, absolutely. In World War II, you mean? But yeah.
Basically, what was decided and promoted by people like Karl Popper, who wrote a book titled "The Open Society and Its Enemies," which
say that Reagan laid the groundwork. Well, that's not the same thing. So, but you need. So you could have done Reagan and still not had what we have today. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it laid the foundation for it, but it could have been taken care of.
By the way, inspired the Open Society Foundation, which of course belongs to George Soros, just in case you still think these ideas are on our side. But the idea was basically that in order to avoid authoritarianism and in order to avoid great conflict, society must be anti-metaphysical. And metaphysics is just a fancy word for how we know things, basically. And so to be anti-metaphysical means not just that you don't know things, but that you can't know things. And we've talked about this before on the channel, and I had some people saying, well, I think you mean epistemology instead of metaphysics. And I understand the confusion, but I don't mean that at all. Because epistemology deals with knowledge and justified belief. I mean that it was anti-metaphysical because it rejected outright the concepts of truth and reality, which is what metaphysics is.
Okay. All right. I'm pretty sure that's still epistemology.
But anyways, and this would be
really
more of the
it's
epistemology of it. They said that the only things that you can know are the things that you can prove empirically and that you could potentially disprove empirically as well. And this was called falsification. And with regards to the scientific method, that's cool. But when you get into what this means for society, it's pretty not cool, because it means that the idea of the nation, the idea of culture, the idea of morality, the idea of religion, all of that exists to restrict the progress of the open society, because the good or utility of these things cannot be necessarily proven empirically. And even if it could, whether the metric is positive.
Oh, okay. So he's doing correlation, causation. So he's seeing a decline in religiosity and the core family unit and stuff like that, and saying that these are the causes of the downfall of society or whatever. And he probably blames liberals or something. So I was actually thinking about this the other day in the car. So the downfall of religion is just sort of a natural progression that's going to happen as you just move away from superstition. That's just normally going to happen. But that doesn't have any correlation towards family rearing. Family rearing specifically, the only really real data that seems to be directly tied to families is like security of the middle class. Like there's a certain level of success where you end up not having families again. I don't know whether it's at, but like super rich people end up having fewer families because they spend a lot of time sort of grinding away at that career, making lots of money. But like the middle class and lower, when secure, their families go up. Like the number of people that get married and have kids really, really rises due to just financial security. Obviously, you had a bump. The baby boom is a good example. You had a good bump from the baby boomers, but the boomers, turns out, bad at parenting. Not good ones. Also, baby boomers really fucking bad at running the country, as it turns out, having an entire generation of people, the boomers, being raised by 2 generations of shell-shocked, PTSD-laden, misogynist societies. Like we went through World War I and World War II, and then Korea, and then Nam, and you're expecting any of these people to have, like, without any sort of, access to healthcare or mental health care, you're expecting these people to be, like, reasonable, well-adjusted human beings and to make good decisions insofar as, like, other people's well-being is concerned. Wild stuff. Absolutely wild stuff. It doesn't make any sense. You can look at this. There's definitely psychology about this kind of thing. And so you have millennials, which I'm pretty sure are the first like real, like, even though we had like wars in the Persian Gulf War, we had obviously Iraq and Afghanistan. The number of troops that were deployed there much lower than the other wars, and though we have our pockets of people that are obviously really affected negatively by that, we have the benefit of having more modern war, and so a lower death toll, and thusly sort of more of a hands or an arm's length away from that, and so we're a little bit better coped. The next generation, even better. The Zoomers haven't had to go to war yet. We're kind of out of that. We'll see. And it's not just about war, but that's like a big part of it, right? Obviously, the economic success post-World War II, due to the fact that we were the only superpower and manufacturing, so you're going to have economic success. And then you get into the 80s and Reaganomics, and then you stop taxing the wealthy in the way that you ought to, and you see a gentle decline of people's security in their homes from a financial perspective, because and this is only for, like, fucking, think about it, this is only white people. There's lots of other groups that had to deal with this too. Obviously, black people went to war a lot, but they have different trauma. Let's just say that, and you guys get it. And so they're not going to be well equipped to have their families in a good mental health place either, due to systemic oppression and stuff like that. And I don't blame them. And I don't necessarily blame the people, the boomers, or the greatest generation, or the golden age people. Like, I don't blame them either. Like, it's hard to do all the things that they did. Like, the mental health toll was obviously incredible, and they did not take very good care of each other, and they still don't. Right? But we're trying to make a better world. You know what I mean? Off the back of all this. And I know this is like a long time span to like really think of, but he's saying that, like, oh, well, religion's going down, families are getting smaller. If we just make religion go up and family get bigger, obviously that'll do the thing. So we need to incentivize people to go to church so that they start making families, because that's the thing that makes economy go burr. Not the thing that makes economy go burr. Effects of a good economy. The religion's separate, but it's the effects of a solid state of living and a high quality of life. That's just what it is. And so provide a high quality of life, these things will recorrect. They're so worried about birth rates and stuff. It's very strange.
For negative is still subjective, and this is why he spent a lot of time critiquing the founding thinkers of Western thought, namely Plato and Aristotle, because he thought that if we can know the truth, then the truth is to be obeyed, which can potentially lead to authoritarianism and conflict. And so to achieve social progress, we have to restrict claims of truth to those which are falsifiable and practice modesty with all other beliefs that don't exist under that umbrella. Those would simply be my truth instead of the truth, because if we can eliminate the things that men care about the most, their nation, their God, their culture, etc., then maybe we can avoid mass conflict and authoritarianism, since the society at that point would theoretically be open. So these guys were trying to prevent World War III by waging war purportedly on collectivism in favor of the open society. But today, what I'm asking you is this: is it really that black and white? This thinking has corrupted modern conservatism to where we think that we either exist as the individual or the collective. And the collective means 1984. We don't like that. But the truth is that there's no such thing.
Why does he keep doing... I know John's young and he hasn't studied any of this shit, but he always does. 1984 World War II. 1984 World War II. He's read some Wikipedia articles. He's read fucking Mein Kampf. And he thinks he knows stuff. Like, man, go to school. Please.
As the individual, which is a liberal idea, by the way. But that doesn't mean that you don't have individual rights. Of course you do. And that doesn't mean that you can't live your life as you please. Of course you can.
Unless John's in charge and you want to be, like, gay. Like, what? Like, I want to marry my husband. Not in John's watch. How can you live your life that you want to live with authoritarian, like, theocracy, John? Like, I understand that he thinks that religion is important. I'm an atheist. I don't even want to get rid of religion, dude. I don't even want to. There's no point in pushing against that. Believe in whatever you want to believe. It's not for me, right? I'm fine with it. But you can't force it. You can't. In the same way that I can't force you not to believe it. Like, you have to meet me at that midline or you're going to lose. You're just going to, because people will not be told how to live. Like, you can see this with the vaccine mandate thing. When you tell people what, like, you try to tell someone what, and they go, no! Just because you told them to. Not even if it's right. They'll literally be obstinate because you told them to. That's daddy issues. I have them too. I'm real stubborn. Like, I get it. But, like, which is kind of why, like, vaccine mandates make a lot of logical sense. Although they're not really mandates. They're more like would you like to participate in this activity? We would like you to not be a plague rat, which I think is fine. But it is still a pathology of the human existence that we have to contend with, which is why I wouldn't have worded the things as much. I basically would have incentivized rather than penalized, because I don't think, like, you know, I'm going to spank you if you don't do this versus I'm going to give you a reward if you do this. Usually people go with the positive reinforcement, even if you have to treat them like babies. But turns out they're babies, so just treat them as such. They're babies. Say, like, hey, if you get a vaccine, I'll give you $500. You know what I mean? And you can treat it like a stimulus. I think people would get the fucking vaccine, man. Give me $500, get the vaccine. Dude. Like, just incentivize people. Same thing with, like, gun buybacks. If you want to get guns off the street, gun buybacks. Not everyone's going to give them your gun for money. But yeah. Need to bring him to class. Dude, John Doyle doesn't think about stuff. Like, I mean, he does think about stuff, but he doesn't think about it in the right way. He stops when he finds something that agrees with conservatism. Like, oh, religion went down, and so did what he considers quality of life, right? So, those must be connected. It's really, really strange.
But from the moment that you are born, you are defined not as an individual, but as a son or as a daughter, and then maybe a brother or a sister, an American, a mentor, whatever. At no point do you ever exist as an individual. No man is an island. You're really not that special because you rely on other people and people rely on you. And it's that interdependence and cohesion upheld through a common culture that is the foundation of a prosperous and flourishing society.
That sounds like Karl Marx.
Now, that being said,
nah, he's going to fuck it up.
There's no such thing as the collective either. It's been tried before, fails every time because it defies the natural proclivities of human nature. My point is that there's actually a balance between individualism and collectivism.
Doesn't everybody agree with this? I'm pretty sure 100% of people agree with that. Like when he hears collectivism, he hears communism, which is weird. There's a collective aspect and an individual aspect to our lives. Everyone agrees with that. There's not really debate. I don't know why you would even, yeah, I agree with that. Now he's going to do this wrong again, but that's okay. Like it's called communism. I mean, straight up, if you want strong communities, leftism's the way, man. I mean, it just is. Because capitalism inherently, and like republicanism and conservatism, inherently stratifies society, right? And with stratification comes like sort of like friction. You know what I mean? Because there's layers, and the layers are going to rub together, especially if it's unjust stratification, right? And so if it's like communityism, yeah. And in a more leftist society, again, one, for instance, where survival necessities are not commodified, just that would allow everyone to share the same amount of dignity and just have some people that have like a bigger house or a car or whatever, you know what I mean? But like you wouldn't have to measure your validity in the system based on your economic success if we simply got rid of the sort of de facto homeless dying state that we put people in if they don't succeed under capitalism, right? And then lower classes right after that, where you go bad part of town, and then there's the middle class where you're like, I'm working class, I'm blue collar, but I'm not white collar, but I want to try to get into management, and then white collar lives in the suburbs, and then people in the suburbs eventually make it up to millionaire status, and then they move out to their like little communities, and you know what I mean? Like we even live separately, right? Which I get it. Like you're going to have economic barriers to that, but that's why like capitalism quite literally seeds this. And I don't know how you can disagree with that even as a capitalist or Republican. Like you must understand that there is class friction, and you do in fact look down on people if you are upper class, and you do in fact not like the rich people if you're lower class. Of course you will, right? There's animosity to be had. It doesn't make any sense to continue that model then, right? Like, why continue the model if you want America to be really strong, right? And I believe that John, in his own fucked up way, I believe that John and other Republicans do want a unified country. Now, they want a homogenous society rather than one that's, like, heterogeneous. But, like, you know, we can find a balance. Like, you can still have your, like, communities of like, we're rootin' tootin' Texas boys. Like, that's fine. I don't give a shit. Go root and toot to your heart's desire, John. But like, I don't know how you can in one breath say, we need a healthy mix of both and be a capitalist.
That is necessary to live in a stable,
at least not a capitalist like he is,
free society. Because if you only focus on individualism like we've been doing for the last 100 years, then there's nothing left to unify people in the society. There's no language, there's no culture, no religion, no shared value framework. The only thing that we have in common is that we have nothing in common, but it's okay because we're all individuals. And you look outside and everything is on fire, society is totally destabilized, and then the government overcorrects for that, and that's when you get your collectivism. That's when you get your big government, which is what we're experiencing right now.
Is collectivism big government? Did I mention, in collectivism, did I mention the government? Because collectivism is literally just our communities. You have obsessive fans? I think maybe you just need to become a fan. Everything's on the fire, by the way, all the time. I don't know. I don't know what world he's living in. There's not this much strife, right? There's not. I mean, it's bad. Like, it could definitely be better. But we're not talking about the government, dude. We're talking about just, like, quite literally stop stratifying on class lines, and a lot gets better. But this is a great pause, by the way. This is a great pause. Oh, she's still up here. I guess we're going to do this, though. Get a little bit of that going on. I'll have to tweet that. Yeah. I got to pop that out there. All right. Carry on.
Because it turns out that you can't actually tell people that to care about things like nation and culture is archaic and uneducated, that to be a somewhere, a hometown boy instead of an anywhere, a member of the laptop class is lesser than. And we'll get into that more in a second. But you can't expect a century of post-war intellectualism to conquer human nature. You just can't. So that's basically the intellectual part. Now there's the authoritarian part, which was basically, okay, how do we stop people from thinking that they get to declare something to be true? So a bunch of sociologists got together at UC Berkeley, many of them members of the Frankfurt School, which was a group of Marxist intellectuals who fled to America during World War II, and they published a work called The Authoritarian Personality.
Dude, every time Frankfurt School, like, it's just, like, he's just going through, playing the hits, man. It's like watching Jimmy Buffett. It's Cheeseburger in Paradise every video.
And it sought to answer two questions. Firstly, what makes a person a potential fascist? And secondly, how can we prevent people in the United States from being socialized into that mindset? So they go through a bunch of charts, and
it's interesting that he doesn't find it important for people coming out of fascism to be worried about how to stop that.
interviews and correlations, and a lot of it depends upon one of the Freudian theories of psychological development that has now just been totally discredited. The survey questions are totally biased. The work itself is tremendously flawed from the standpoint of methodology. But what's alarming is that their conclusion was that the potential fascist is an American who was raised in a hierarchical family that supports a dichotomous understanding and conception of right versus wrong and man versus woman, which means that if you were raised in a relatively normal American family, you were taught right from wrong and that men are men and women are women.
Jesus Christ. See, that's the thing, right? Like, that's the part, right? You're telling people how to live your lives. That's fascism. It might not be full fascism, but it's a part of it. It's authoritarianism. You can't be doing that, John. That's the part. You just said you wanted freedom. Why doesn't anybody else get freedom too? You want to live like however you live, and you happen to live as a cis straight dude. I do too, man. I get it. I don't want anyone making me wear a dress. Nobody's gonna, though. Even if I might look good in one. It's not happening. I'm not gonna make anybody else not wear a dress. I'm not gonna make anyone else wear a hoodie. I'm not gonna make anyone else be a Pistons fan, even though we're on the come up. Just saying, Cade Cunningham, first overall pick, is gonna play this weekend. Anyway, this is just like, it's wild stuff. It's wild stuff. Right from wrong. What's right from wrong, bro? What is right from wrong? A lot of people know the general stuff, like don't murder people, like don't punch cats. Like there's lots of easy stuff, but being trans, being gay, being something that you're not, like what? You can't start policing other folks' lives, and then like I genuinely don't know how you could think you're for freedom. It doesn't make any sense. Even if you think that it's bad for people to be gay. Even if you're like, oh, that's degeneracy. It doesn't matter what you think. What are their actions? That's their personal life for them. What are their actions? And they're not going to be necessarily immoral. Like what? You genuinely cannot even try to legislate that, nor can you try to add it to the political conversation more broadly as far as like a prescription to fix the country. It cannot be a thing.
Congratulations, you're a potential fascist. And we can laugh about that, but the publication ends with the author saying that there's not much that can be done about the adults who manifest authoritarian personalities, and so attention must be turned to children. And social scientists must work to teach children values of egalitarianism, democracy, subjectivism, openness, etc., because that is the only way to prevent authoritarianism and great conflict. Sounds great, but here we are now living under increasing authoritarianism and existing basically as a tinderbox of 330 million people who feel isolated, depressed, and without purpose. But we're told that we should just ignore that because we have access to cooler and cheaper products now. And that's why they want your kids in public schools at younger ages and for longer amounts of time. And if you refuse, it's because you're a threat to democracy and should probably be investigated by the FBI, because the iron law of propaganda is that the younger you start, the less it has to make sense. And how do you eliminate any threat to the open society? Any threat to the maintaining of the amoral power vacuum, to people being able to do whatever they want? You simply eliminate conservatism, because conservatism, by definition, and especially within the American context, seeks to conserve a society that was happy and prosperous and moral.
By sabotaging all of those things, right? Like, why were they happy, dude? Because they had them in, like, America had an incredible monopoly on manufacturing. We can't do that again. And the only way to do that would be to wage an incredible war on the countries that do. Oh, weird. I wonder why you guys are so hawkish. Like, you can't return to the way it was, because the way it was. It's not now. It isn't currently. That's what was means. You also can't, like, the prosperity thing, you have to just get over that shit. You've got to get over the idea that you can somehow reclaim 50s, like, capitalism. We don't live in that world. We would have to go back to an economy that wouldn't be tenable, and it would cause more strife. Like, it doesn't make any sense. As far as the happiness is concerned, the happiness goes down as the like wages decrease and like crony billionaire capitalism continues to spread its inky tendrils around the fucking country's throat, dude. Like, there, it doesn't have to be fully socialist. We don't have to go full fucking commie overnight, John. Like, I don't know where they get this idea that the left only wants, like, tomorrow communism. It's like, no, dude. We could do, like, better capitalism for quite a long time. And by the time your grandchildren are old people, maybe then they'll be moving into some sort of like really, really socialisty thing. But like, we should do that, to be fair, immediately. You can't do it immediately. It doesn't make any sense. It literally doesn't make any sense. You can say it like, oh, it'd be nice, but like it makes no pragmatic sense whatsoever. It can't be done. We are capitalism. The current system makes sense? No. Apparently you're not paying attention. You can't just undo something you already did. You have to understand that there are implications and consequences to the decisions that people before us made. You gotta continue that path. You can't just abort and get off the road until there's an exit, bro. That's just the ditch. You gotta wait for a pull-off, man. So, I mean, if you're frustrated, that's on you. You got to have the patience to move that forward and drive the fucking car. If you're not willing to, then what the fuck? Like, what's even the point? What? No exit, only forward. Well, definitely not that, because we're on capitalism highway right now. You want to take the exit, and you want to get off and go the other way. But you gotta still fucking drive the car to that point. It's got to be a thing. You can't just fucking drive through the woods. It's not GTA, bro. You gotta throw a climate catastrophe into that analogy, maybe. It's raining real hard. It's snowing in July. I don't know, dude. Like, yes, climate catastrophe is it's a different subject that will affect all the roads. Yeah. The road ahead is on fire. Well, the road ahead just crumbles into dust and then the fire's behind it. But yeah, either way, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. According to this line of thinking, we live with it for a few years. Dude, according to this line of thinking, is the only way it makes sense. Like, you're living in a little baby brain if you think that we could just communism overnight. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like living in a fucking fantasy. It's not a video game, bro. There are actual apparatuses globally due to American capitalism. If you shut those off, everyone in the world, what is happening right now is the only way anything makes sense. Are you listening to me? Motherfucker, will you spend 2 seconds listening to words instead of typing them? Can you spend 2 seconds not typing and just waiting for an answer? I am not saying that capitalism is good. I'm saying that you have to understand that you can't uncapitalism. You dumb motherfucker. Are you serious? That's dim as shit. You're being dim. Be bright. That is just ridiculous. What are you going to fucking... Well, tomorrow we're going to uncapitalism, and the rest of the world will agree for some reason. What? No! It's not how it works. You need to lay the groundwork, and you need a cultural shift, right? Because consider a capitalist framework for your brain, right? Like, if you are a capitalist, or you're even just a fucking person that doesn't even think about it, but you live under capitalism, right? You have no opinion whatsoever. Right? You've only known capital exchange for your labor and for goods and services and for food and for rent and everything like that. You can't just overnight say, money's done, and have everybody just go like, oh, okay, I get it. This will work. No. Culturally speaking, you have to teach people how to be better. You have to. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. Just because you've read a whole bunch of theory or something and are unable to communicate it properly, clearly, like, it does not mean that the vast majority of people are going to be just on board overnight. It's a cultural zeitgeist shift. And if you don't understand that, you're not advocating for things in a good way, and you will lose, and you will lose it for the rest of us. Bad communication of leftist policy is the number one thing the left does poorly. Number one thing. All the far left MLs and shit, you're all fucking dog water at this topic, dude. Dog water at it. It doesn't make any sense. It'd be nice if we could do communism overnight. Sure, it'd be nice. You know what else would be nice? If someone was sucking my ding-ding right now. I would love that. Okay? But right now, I'm working. Can't do it on Twitch. Gotta wait till later. Okay? Not happening right now. We can't have it all. We gotta drive the car forward and take the exit, man. You got to do it right. You got to start decommodifying survival necessities. You got to make sure that healthcare is okay. You got to make sure that education's okay. Make sure that people have the ability to, if they do not have success under capitalism, have a place to stay with dignity and health and safety and be able to clean themselves and keep their stuff in a safe place. You need to be able to make sure that everybody has these basic things before you can say, by the way, no more personal property. Like, what? How are you going to tell people no or private property, rather? But, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how are you even going to broach the topic? When you say no more private property, do capitalists even understand what you're saying? Have you ever had a capitalist go, oh, okay, that makes sense? No! Because you're bad at explaining shit. Yeah, you're bad at it. Get better at it, guys. Please. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Ridiculous stuff. And then this guy's just like, more capitalism, more of it. More fire. Surely the fire will choke the other fire out. Ridiculous, man. Wild stuff. Wild stuff.
And Christian, and it was that way because we had structure in society. And liberalism in the open society will inevitably result in leftism, but it's a lot easier to get to that point if you can just make everything liberal and then capitalize on that disaster instead of trying to make the argument to conservatives as to why the total deracination of their society is good, actually. So what do? They're already writing the history books, they're communists, and they've got 70 years of global propaganda that has taught everybody from infancy that fascism is the worst thing ever.
Uh-oh.
Nazis are always the bad guys.
Uh-oh.
Never mind the communists who killed tens of millions of more people, who genocided Christians.
Oh, boy.
And who currently occupy your governments and virtually every other institution in the country.
Does he think communists are in charge of the government? What? Communists?
No. It's those Nazis who don't even exist anymore. You got to be real careful with those ones.
Bro, you're right here making a video.
Got to be real careful. They're tricky, those Nazis. They're tricky. And remember what we talked about in the beginning with the emotional response as a product of propaganda conditioning? They can now weaponize that against you because they can take 2 bullet points from fascism and say, fascism was socially conservative, just like conservatism. And you know what else it was? It was anti-communism. Just like conservatism, they're the same thing.
Well, it's the authoritarianism and the prescriptive nature on how each individual ought to live their lives in their own home. That's definitely part of Nazism. The scapegoating of minority groups and then vilifying them and trying to criminalize them. That's part of Nazism, all part of republicanism. There's other bullet points, is what I'm saying. Hypermilitarism is a good example. Incredibly militarized and authoritative policing, like the Gestapo. Another conservative point there. I mean, I could go on, but do we need to? Like...
And so they can basically channel some of that negative emotional response that they've created onto you as a conservative. That's why they call you a Nazi, because they define Nazi as simply anti-communist and not particularly a fan of gay stuff.
No.
And even now, communism is operatively defined by gay stuff.
Is it? There's just lots of gay people that agree with communism. Because communism, of course, has no structure within it that would limit your freedom of expression.
Justice, more broadly speaking, but they've abandoned any legitimate efforts to advocate.
While conservatism and fascism do.
For the workers on behalf of just completely shilling for the establishment because they're all the useful idiots that their daddy Lenin wrote about. Like, there is a reason that these people are backed by all the mega corporations, why they can act with total impunity without having to worry about the law enforcement in this country, which serves the establishment, even tracking them. And it's because they...
Admits it doesn't track leftist violence. There isn't... The FBI... God. The FBI doesn't track leftist, like, terrorist groups for the same reason that they don't hunt down unicorns for their horns. You know?
They are the establishment. They are adjacent to it. They are serving its ends. And the reason they don't realize this, the reason they still think they're against the establishment, is because they are the useful idiots. And they have totally abandoned material equality as a metric for their success or their progress or whatever. Now, all that defines progress is the advancement of social justice and equity. And so ironically...
That's not true. The only thing that... What? John, hey, John. The only thing that marks progress is social, like, justice. What? No. I listed... The only thing I've listed here, I think, for my prescriptive, like, fixes to the country have been, like, economic, right? Have been, like, policy things that don't have anything to do with social. Decommodify survival needs and education. That's like the whole thing. It's like the bang that drum over and over. That's all we need to start the ball towards a better world. That's it. Those things, well, and climate, but like that's different.
The only thing that made that possible in the first place was our material progress in society. These decadent and cosmopolitan and bourgeois ideas that are so practically idiotic and backwards. Inflation is through the roof. Gas prices are up. Nationwide blackouts are being predicted. People are being fired. The supply lines are destroyed. They're not even lying anymore and saying this isn't happening. They're saying this is all good, actually. Read this op-ed from an expert. All material conditions are irrelevant. Eternal social justice is all that matters. And they're too stupid to understand that a fixation on social justice or whatever is only possible in a society that is so materially well off that people have become bored and need to manufacture struggle in their own lives to feel a sense of purpose. I understand this.
Wait, why does he think that... Why does he think that the struggle is manufactured? Like, what's that about? What's the... It doesn't make any sense, man. Like, these people's struggles are real. It doesn't have to be manufactured at all. They're not making up strife.
Because I am smarter than them. My brain contains all of their brains. That's what's funny about nowadays. People on both the left and right think I'm extreme or something, that I'm like out of touch. And it's like, do you understand that you're the weird ones? If I time...
No, it must be everyone else. Jesus Christ. Have you ever seen like a better case of Dunning-Kruger than fucking John Doyle, dude? Like shit, even Sargon of Akkad has a little bit more humility here.
Travel to any point in human history, and I could talk to the people there. They'd agree with me on 99% of issues.
They wouldn't agree with you on 99% of issues.
I'm not weird. You guys are the weird ones. Everybody used to more or less think like me, talk like me, etc. You guys are taking pride in being normal in alarmingly weird times as if that's a good thing. You guys are the weird ones. And if you time traveled back to Times Square in 1945 and tried to talk to a World War II soldier, you would be unpleasantly surprised. OMG, you guys are the real Antifa, this, so much this. And he'd be like, what are you, some kind of fairy? Go take a long walk on a short pier, pal. It really is spectacular that these people can simultaneously think that we're fascists for holding identical beliefs to the generation that fought a war against fascism. But you can believe things like this when no one's ever going to hold you accountable because you serve the ends of the regime.
Wait, but you but that brand of fascism wasn't why you fought them. You didn't fight them on political lines. Otherwise, you would have joined the war early, right? Because you would have been like, wow, fascism's bad. Italy did fascism. Germany and Austria are doing fascism. They're spreading. Like, Japan's doing fascism. Well, imperialistic, fascist, whatever. But, like, it's close. So, like, what? Because that's not why we entered the war at all. We entered the war because we got bombed, and there was an ally thing, and we had an economic point to make. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't altruism. Like, what is he pretending that the war was about? Does he think that we went there to save the Jews? If we were there to save the Jews, we'd have stopped their genocide. Like, what? Hitler was Time Magazine Man of the Year. What are you talking about? You guys are weird, man. Read a book.
Speaking of being held accountable, have you accepted responsibility for the safety of your...
Is he still doing a fucking ad? Holy fucking trash bag.
Existed forever, and they concluded that the concept of an enforced open society, oxymoron check, was the solution. This would also be a good time to mention that all of this intellectual nonsense, all this critical theory, it's largely just the response of academia to the Industrial Revolution, because to get a university education used to mean that you would study the great and founding texts of Western civilization. You would learn to cultivate virtue and discipline. You would learn to appreciate tradition and your community. But then after the Industrial Revolution, the fixation on material innovation shifted focus away from the liberal arts towards the contextual equivalent of what we call STEM. And over time, the only way for the liberal arts and the social sciences to compete with that innovation was to innovate for itself. But you can't simply create new founding thinkers of Western civilization.
Wait. The liberal art. America is like the world leader in like selling culture. Like Korea and Japan are like right behind it. Like what? It's really weird. We have entire industries surrounding like art. Like Disney is one of the largest corporations on the planet. What?
Civilization. And so the innovation was just to critique everything. That was the new product.
The innovation was to critique everything? Holy shit, this guy read one Reddit post and now he thinks he can make this kind of like broad statement. That's wild.
To critique every founding thinker and tradition and value upon which this country was built. So they stand on the shoulders of giants and they think that they're flying, but they've innovated nothing except for the grandest displays of narcissism and cognitive dissonance that the world has ever seen before.
How can John Doyle say that other people have cognitive dissonance and delusions of grandeur? Huh.
And this was the result. It basically reduced academia to a class of children with nothing original or valuable to contribute to society.
He needs to enter academia and have like one conversation. Thanks for the 10 months and innovating your critiques with this month's sub.
Literally just want to sit around all day going,
cool sage.
What if this happened? What if this happened? They're literally children. Mama, what if no one fought ever again forever? Mama, what if everyone was from the same country? And then what if, Mama, and then what if everyone could just do whatever they wanted to do forever? Mama, what if because of man's flawed nature, that society devolved into a perpetual state of chaos and sin that bred widespread despair and mental illness? And then, Mama, what if we turned...
Wait, but widespread despair and mental illness happened under your system. This is your system doing that. It's criticism of the true enemy of the right. Like, what? Because I'm assuming he's talking about communism with the stateless society and that anyone can just do whatever they want. That's just the goal, dude. Like, everyone knows that that's kind of like not realistic, right? Like, everybody knows, even the most commie among us know that like we're never gonna live in like that utopia. It's like the point is to like we should try though, right? Because isn't the point of like existence to try to like be happy and be fulfilled in whatever way that is? And if working a shift job in the coal mine is the way that you want to like live your dreams, then go for it. Get up in that coal mine, dude. But like, there's a better way. We could probably have better lives than that, you know, from time to time. I think. I don't know that we always need to be mining coal. You know, I think we could probably. In fact, in 2016, I retweeted this before. There was a study that showed that in 2016, so not today, which is probably worse. Although unemployment went up because fuck employers for not providing a livable wage. But in 2016, a study went out that the modern American worker has less vacation time than a medieval serf. Should that fucking maybe highlight a problem? Maybe?
We turned everybody against the people trying to stop it by convincing everyone after we starved them of a sense of purpose or identity, Mama, that the only way for them to be happy is to maintain the open society by any means necessary. Mama, what if actual children... Wow, you really figured it out, didn't you? Here's something...
Why straw man like this? Why not steel man the whole argument, man? Like... Why go for this weird, like, I don't know, fake individual? Seems a little sus that you wouldn't be able to. It's interesting that he doesn't react to commentary on his channel, and he's the only person that speaks for the most part on any of his videos. Huh.
Something no one talks about anymore, but is nonetheless true. The founding fathers would be appalled to see what their country has devolved into, but not for the reasons that people so often talk about. Not because of the like Department of Transportation or whatever, but because people used to raise families.
You have to allow people to have the means to raise families, buddy.
They used to buy property.
They have to have the money to buy property, buddy.
Used to go to church.
I mean, church is a totally separate thing. But see what I was saying earlier? He correlates church, home ownership, and family making with like, if you don't do those things, you're not going to have a happy life. But they can't do those things. Like, they are pay-gated out of that. Like, it's like a loot box, but an economy.
And of course, hindsight is 20/20, but these concepts of limited...
That's not hindsight. There was foresight for this for like 100 years.
Government, states' rights, these concepts which we now pretend are our golden ticket back to when America was great, those all presuppose relativism. They presuppose individualism. They presuppose the power vacuum, right? They make no serious declaration as to how things ought to be, but instead declare that we should minimize the ability of anyone to say or enforce how things ought to be in society. And
yeah, but you when you say ought to be, it's a moral prescription, not like a policy prescription. Like, when he says ought to be, he means you ought to act a certain way. Pretty weird.
And that was done is because the social institutions in this country were basically taken for granted. And so it was thought that government should be structured such that it couldn't interfere with them. This is why separation of church and state is incorrectly understood, and what it was actually intended to be was the separation of church from state, so that the state couldn't interfere with the church, because the church in this country, until somewhat recently actually, was a more powerful institution than the government, and that was a good thing, and they wanted to keep it that way.
You don't see any problem with, and this is wild because that is not what they thought. Because I mean, you can read a lot of writings on founding father theory about this, but the Church of England was incredibly powerful, and there were also like the Holy Roman Empire, just the Vatican in general, and the way that the church sort of operated. Lots of theory on the idea that the church, because you can funnel money into it, became a power apparatus that worked independent from government, that became very similar to what the problem is that you just illustrated at the beginning of this video, which was billionaires can basically just have so much money that they, and corporations that they can turn and like buy swaths of the government, which literally happens, by the way. They could buy swaths of the government and be in control of that due to the amount of capital they have, and like pay off politicians to get their policies pushed through. Very similarly, the church would use its money to enforce its particular brand of morality and saying that people like need to support the church with their money. People need to go to church. A lot of this stuff is not super ethical because, again, capitalism. Now, if you made it so that churches couldn't make money, I'd be fine with that. Go for it.
But the problem is that framework of government is only sustainable with those social institutions in place.
He's quite literally making a case for fascism, by the way. Isn't that wild? Like, he's saying, like, oh, well, we shouldn't have as many freedoms. Pretty wild.
That's why the founder said that the Constitution was written for a moral and religious people, and that there's no way it would function in any other society. That is not ambiguous. They are talking about Christianity. They are talking about piety. And this is inconvenient to a lot of so-called conservatives nowadays because they just want to continue to define freedom as the freedom to pursue their preferred method of self-destruction because they're addicted to vice and they're too weak to realize or do anything about that. And this is what the libertarians get wrong.
Christo-fascist,
their whole concept of the NAP, the non-aggression principle, it's the brainchild of the harm principle from John Stuart Mill, one of the founding thinkers of liberalism, individualism, etc. But if you read what he actually wrote, it wasn't just that he wanted government to stay out of his business and for people to not steal his property. No, he was actually against the whole concept of social laws, even more so than institutional laws, because he recognized that they were often more powerful in terms of compelling individual behavior. So in other words, even the founding thinkers of liberalism wanted an amoral society. They wanted the power vacuum. They wanted the abolition of social institutions because those inherently set standards as to how society should conduct itself, which, if you can't tell by now, is wholly unsustainable. Because here's what happens. Oftentimes we get locked into this false dichotomy of individualism versus collectivism. We think it's like this tug of war between individual and collective, and even if there's some overlap or compromise between the two, that's just like the rope not yet crossing either of the lines during the struggle. This is not the case.
Okay.
To reiterate, I don't like collectivism. I like unity. There's a difference. We used to have unity. Now we have collectivism. And unity is not what leads to collectivism. In fact, unity is the only thing that can resist collectivism, because collectivism is enforced by the state, which would be impossible if the people were unified. But what actually leads to collectivism is individualism, and I will explain why right now. But just keep that in mind, that individualism...
Dude, will you just say words like and make the point?
Properly understood is simply the preceding stage of decline before collectivism, because collectivism does not oppose individualism. It actually requires it. Think about it. Organic unity between people occurs through family, through community, through church, through nation, etc. This is the backbone of every healthy society. Collectivism is different because the unity is enforced by the state as a response to the society destabilizing and coming apart. Because once you can strip people of all identity, everything that could have unified them, not only does the society become a tinderbox of people who have nothing in common and who don't trust each other, but once the collective identity becomes having no identity, then the herd will preserve that anti-identity by going against anybody who tries to conserve an identity through collectivism, because that identity will go against the only thing that they have left to identify with, which is their worship of the state. That is the timeline.
Who worships the state?
And that's what has happened here. We went from organic unity to individualism to collectivism, because it turns out that having nothing in common with anybody, being the only thing everyone has in common, is not a sustainable model for a society. And so collectivism and big government can be understood correctly as basically adding...
It's so weird that he thinks the 50s had unity. It's so weird. I'm in Vegas right now, and I can safely say this dude's got more gymnastics than Cirque du Soleil. Yeah. Thanks, Cool Sage.
Columns and buttresses to this whole setup to keep it from imploding on itself like a collapsing star. The system is unsustainable, and they know that. And so we enter the managed decline phase of things to try to minimize the blast radius of the inevitable collapse. But the scary part is that the people managing the decline are far less intelligent and capable than the people who orchestrated the decline in the first place. So we'll see what happens, I suppose. Just a matter of time. Man versus time. Isn't that always it? Man wrestling with the reality of his own impermanence. You know, back in healthy times, man would dedicate his life to the pursuit of something greater than himself. God, family, nation, etc. That is how he conquered time. He would elevate himself towards a greater purpose to achieve this like quasi-eternal state, whether that's through eternal salvation or being revered by your descendants for having achieved greatness for your people. What happens, though, when you strip away all identity? How does man conquer time? How does he transcend it? He does so by pretending that it doesn't exist. He overcomes time by simply distracting himself from it with endless media and entertainment. Ask a man to tell you about himself in healthy times. He says he's a Christian, he's a father, he's a son, he's a proud citizen of whatever nation. Ask a man the same question now. He's far more likely to tell you about his favorite Netflix shows and fast food chains. That's what liberalism does.
Why does he think that's liberalism? That shit's capitalism. Why does he... it's so weird. It's so weird to get the answer wrong there. Like, what do you think leads to any of that? But which is, by the way, probably not the answer that you would give. But, like, it doesn't make any sense. The capitalism is, like, the problem every single time he brings up, like, I hate this. Like, it's capitalism. You hate capitalism. It's so weird.
That's what individualism does. It reduces identity to that which can be commercialized. This is the concept of the graphic t-shirt. This is a new phenomenon in human history. This is what media I like. I wear it on my clothing as a flag to others who might identify with this as well. This is who I am. And this has highlighted the two types of people we have.
Capitalism. Again, what?
There are two categories that people fall into.
Fast fashion? He's just mad about that? What's...
Now, those who prioritize self-expression against those who prioritize self-dedication.
You can do both. You could express yourself in a way that makes you feel good at all times, and then there is
the people who simply want to dedicate their lives to something greater than themselves.
You can. What do you mean? People can do that and dedicate themselves to, like, the pursuit of education or being a doctor or being an artist or, you know, doing all sorts of stuff. Like, there's lots of dedication. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Against the people who will stop at nothing to be able to express themselves in any way that they like, whether it's parades, it's public sex, it's redefining gender, it's having the audacity to criticize the great literature of our civilization, to criticize their own ancestors.
You can't criticize stuff? Why are you such a pussy? Why can't we criticize shit? What the fuck? I don't understand. They're gonna criticize fucking, I mean, yeah, that's what we do. You have to criticize stuff. You have to understand. Look at it critically. That's what criticize is. You can't do critiques. What the fuck, man? Like, what are we supposed to mindlessly drool off to the mines? Like, what do you mean?
It's all of it. It's narcissism versus selflessness. It's left versus right. You used to raise families and buy property. Now what do you do? Now you find your...
What do you mean narcissism versus selflessness? Bro, the entire apparatus through which we want, like the entire viewpoint that leftists have on how we ought to run the nation and the world is one of literally not an uncaring individual versus another uncaring individual, which is what we have with capitalism. We are quite literally pitted against one another. The entire thesis of leftist policy at any point is for unity through equity. Like, in however many ways that you can try to ensure equity. Now, that doesn't mean equity of outcome. It only means equity of standard of living and equity of opportunity. Like, these are the two things. Like, that's it. It has everything to do with the betterment of our fellow people. The same reason, excuse me, masks, for instance. Wearing a mask is quite, like, we always argue about, it's about everybody, not just one person. It's about all of us collectively for a healthier America and world. I don't understand, like, what leftist policy can you think of that is strictly for an individual? Pretty odd stuff. We don't have to look the same and all have the same sexuality and gender for us to get along, John. Those things don't really run into each other. There's not a lot of conflict when like a gay person and a straight person exist in the same space, and the straight person is wearing wacky loud clothes and the gay person is very subdued with socks and sandals. You know how the gays dress? Like, this isn't a situation where those two butt heads because they are different individuals with different proclivities for expression and how they view themselves and their sexuality and their gender or whatever. Like, these aren't friction points. Friction points happen with class. Friction points happen with unjust hierarchical structures like policing, or bad management, or billionaires. Like, so weird. Obi-Wan, thanks for the 100 biddies. I have a feeling John doesn't think of capitalism and socialism as economic policies, and instead, to him, they're cultural, even possibly religious institutions. He sees capitalism as the Christian political machine, and socialism as communism and anti-Christian. I don't know, maybe.
Yourself.
He certainly sees communism as opposed to Christianity, which is weird.
What does that even mean? I promise you that you're not that interesting. I just have to like find myself, man. I need to travel. I love to travel. That's always been so off-putting to me.
Why?
Love traveling too, but these people make it their whole personality, and it's because...
But what if they want to
It's all they have. It's not going to make you a more interesting person. It's just another totally commercialized cope for the fact that you don't have an identity anymore.
What? Most people that I know that like to travel like to do so because they get to experience other cultures and shit. Like, and it's just like an enriching sort of human experience. I thought he said he wanted community. He wants community, but he doesn't want anyone to travel to other communities to spread that communal feeling. Huh.
And you don't even value the history or the identity of the places that you want to travel to anyways, because you can only conceptualize culture in terms of street festivals. You think culture is just food, music, clothing, and art. You have educated yourself into enlightenment, yet you...
I mean, those are definitely big facets of culture, sure, but there's like language, and there's idiom, and there's I mean the way that they school. There's the climate, there's the topography, the geography. There's lots of different cultural facets that go into, like, it's just so much more than that. I don't know that anybody has that reduced of a viewpoint on travel, except for, white middle upper class people. So.
cannot conceptualize that Western civilization is not the natural state of the world, that other cultures are more sophisticated than just what can be sold to you at a street festival. You have no idea how they view morality, friendship, hierarchy, their concepts of justice, of modesty, respect, beauty, time, none of it, because you're an idiot. You have absolutely no comprehension of the places you feel as though you just must travel to. As far as you can tell, you're just going from Six Flags Chicago to Six Flags Texas. Minuscule differences at best. You have this urge to aimlessly explore and walk through this maze because you think it's going to help you understand your surroundings, and the tower that you could have climbed to look down at the world around you and say, this is what this is. This is the truth of this world. This is my purpose. I understand my role now. That's been taped off with a sign that says, sorry, this is outdated and problematic. We know better now.
What would be the tower in the metaphor? Is it religion? Is it Christianity specifically? But I don't know how that's anti-travel. Like, this is a weird rant. What is the tower in the metaphor? Is he going to say?
Please visit the Labyrinth gift shop for more information. And that's the thing. If they can reduce culture and identity to simply a commodity, then they can sell it to you. So now,
who's they? Corporate people that commodify fucking everything because you want them to? I don't understand. Like, leftists don't agree with the commodification of culture in the way that it is done. Like, what? There's constantly, like, you yell at people for being like, hey, that's appropriation. You yell at these people. Like, oh, you're making money off June came around, you rainbow capitalism, and you're just like, fucking everyone's woke. It's like, you think Chase is woke when they put a fucking rainbow on their Twitter avatar? Like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? God.
Now, here's the really important question. What honest argument could possibly be left for liberalism? We know that leftism is ridiculous, never works, disproven theoretically, disproven practically. It is irrelevant. But the idea was, if we can just conserve liberalism, and then we'll be okay. And then once it became clear that liberalism just devolves as well, the more honest argument was, okay, yeah, we don't have to have a culture. We don't.
But I don't know who's saying we don't want to have a culture or anything. Who is saying any of these things? It's so weird.
Have to have a sovereign nation. We don't have to have a God. We don't have to have stability or security. We don't have to have a language or any shared history. But hey, all of that's going to be okay.
We have a language and shared history. I don't understand. I don't understand what the prescription here is or what liberal is saying these things. I don't know leftists that would say these things. Like, what?
Because we have consumerism. This is the land of opportunity. Is that just a nicer way of saying that this country is just an economic zone to be looted and nothing else? Yeah, but it'll all work out, trust me. But now it's quite obvious that it hasn't worked out because now even the supply chains are totally messed up. So now what?
The supply chains are messed up because of COVID because you won't wear a fucking mask. Like, literally all of this is your fault. What are you talking about? I'm trying desperately to come up with justifications for these claims of, like, we don't want, like, a shared culture. Like, I think understanding that we don't have, like, a homogenous culture is not the same thing as having, like, unity through culture. Because, like, you can have unity via culture from different cultures. I'll give you an example. I could go hang out with any group of people. Think of a group of people, Southern people. I'm not from the South. We don't have the same thing, but we could, and many people do, share culture through the differences in our culture and thus make us more unified. Like, and this happens all the time. Travel is a great reason for this because once we get the perspective of someone from, like, the deep South, and I go to Savannah, Georgia, which I guess is sort of deep. It's more dirty South than deep South, but whatever. Savannah, Georgia, and I get some boiled peanuts, and I get some hoe cakes, which are delicious. I'm gonna find a lot of cultural differences, and they're gonna be like, "Wow, you're very northern," and we'll talk about that. But there can be, like, crossover. We might have different opinions on things. Like, I'm sure there'd be more likely to be religious than I would be, for instance. We would talk different. Obviously, our accents would be different. I did a bad Savannah, Georgia accent moments ago. But there would be similarities between that. Like, they would make you know, and he said food is like, you think culture is only food. I mean, food's a lot of culture, because food is like for instance, like one single dish can tell a story about culture. Macaroni and cheese is a great example of like a thing we consider an American institution, right? But it tells the history of macaroni and cheese is so much more interesting than just eating some delicious mac and cheese, dude. Macaroni and cheese is a French dish that was picked up specifically by George Washington's top chef / slave. I believe his name was Caesar. Right? Was it Hercules, maybe? I forget. Hercules or Caesar. You know, they name their slaves weird. This came about only because of the slave trade, and because George Washington really wanted a French-trained slave, and then he became a famous... Yeah, it was Hercules. He became a famous chef, and then George Washington had dinner parties where they served mac and cheese, and it just became sort of a cultural staple for the American founding fathers, who then took it back to their homes, and then it sort of trickled out from there, because it's an easy thing to make with ingredients we have here. And suddenly mac and cheese becomes like a staple in the American diet, and it becomes like part of soul food in certain areas. Like, very fascinating. And that's just mac and cheese. And so if you could just talk about just one thing that we all share that culturally started, you know, in Virginia or something, like, but it trickled all over the place. Now there's a million different types of mac and cheese, and now it's interesting that like you can have that conversation. Like, that's just one example of the ways that we can like share culture through our differences. Isn't that interesting? Like, I don't know. There's just so many more interesting things that you could do. Sure, there's also, it doesn't have to be just food, of course. You know, the ways that we dress, the ways that we talk, the kind of music we make, the art that we make, the idioms we use are very fascinating. I don't know, like our thoughts on a lot of different things, the way we organize our genders and our the gender roles rather. How we organize society, like all of this comes from different aspects. Just wild stuff. I mean, I just really don't know where he's coming from.
The only honest argument left for liberalism was consumerism, but that's done now too. So what even is left? Well, but that wasn't real liberalism. Leftism is the inevitable result of liberalism. I
disagree.
Like the roof scene in The Departed. We're done with liberalism. That is the stupidest thing you could do. We just need to go back to shut the up. This is the full cycle of liberalism.
He's getting real mad.
Do you not understand? Truth will always prevail, but it goes through this retarded telephone.
Oh boy. Yikes.
Game with liberalism. Look at the sexual revolution. Sex is about creating life. Well, no, it's about it feels good. Now here we are. People are developing breeding kinks. Look at feminism.
The breeding. God damn it. Dude, sometimes I know this guy doesn't fuck. As a person who fucks. Look, kinks are fine, man. Kinks are good. You know how to have them. You can have them. It's dope. Like I'm in the kink space. It's breeding kinks are literally the oldest. Getting cum in is kind of like just like base human stuff. And the reason the breeding kink has gotten bigger is because prophylactics and stuff have gotten better. And so you can safely do a thing that we're biologically predisposed to enjoy with the lack of a baby. So you can do it more often without having to go through the baby stuff. And then also, maybe you want a baby at some point. You can have a baby, but maybe you just want to be filled up with daddy's cummies. Sometimes it happens like that, you know?
Women are defined by their ability to create life. No, women can do it.
The right doesn't have a breeding kink. No, actually, the biggest kink, according to studies recently for porn searches, and this is true, the farther right you get, the higher, on average, your top kink is race play. And if you don't know what race play is, just think about it for 2 seconds. Yeah, it's about denigrating someone based on their race, or being denigrated based on your race during sexual intercourse, which, go for it, but I'm not surprised that it happens on the right. Let's just say that. Yeah. Also, if we want to emulate our Greek ancestors, we should be fucking way more. Well,
anything men can do. Now here we are. No such thing as women, just birthing persons. Nature is healing, but
Well, okay, so the reason that this is mothers still exist. Some people are mothers. Birthing people is a it's a term just to help people that identify as men or non-binary or gender fluid or something. Just people that don't take on the mother moniker when going through any sort of pregnancy or not even that. Just if they have like maybe uterine problems or something. This language just opens up healthcare for in a way that allows the a wider breadth of patronage. How about that? Does that make sense?
At what cost? Turns out that labels actually matter because they separate things and they define things. And it turns out that if there is to be
we have labels and definitions. In fact, we have more labels and definitions, which means that we're more accurately defined people, right? So you should be for it.
America, then
if you're worried about that.
Actually has to mean something to be an American other than just this tautology of I'm an American because...
Well, an American is a person who lives in America. Americans don't have a specific set of values. They never have. That's why we have elections. Sure, sometimes we all agree on some things because some things make sense. But like we all agree that mac and cheese is pretty tasty. Even if you don't like mac and cheese, you can understand why someone might fuck with it. You know what I mean? You'd be like, yeah, okay, people like cheese, people like noodles, people like butter. It's got all of that. It's just a fatty, noodly yum-yum. So, like, just weird shit, man.
Because I say I'm an American, equally nonsensical to I'm a woman because I say I'm a woman. If everybody can be an American, then no one can be. It's literally like Syndrome in The Incredibles. If everybody's American, then no one will be. It's because the word will be meaningless.
Not everybody's
along with
American.
The identity. By the way, The Incredibles is actually implicitly right-wing. I could do a whole series on implicitly right-wing films. Think about it. The whole theme is that hierarchy is real and it should be used as a force for good. And the evil comes from the insecure wanting equality through force, through technology, because of their own insecurities and trauma. Really makes you think. Why The Incredibles is implicitly right-wing. 43-minute video essay by John Doyle. But seriously, this is the divide. Militantly self-expressive versus the self-dedicating. And that's why if you look at the divide in this country, it's not like issues of economics. It's about issues of sovereignty, about morality, about identity, and about purpose. Everything else is basically a distraction. Everyone's an American, John. That's just another way of saying no one is. It's so true. Hey, guys, if you like this...
All right. So that's John Doyle, man. John fucking Doyle, dude.